The North Sea doesn't forgive mistakes. Lieutenant Commander Lionel Buster, Crabbe knew this better than most men alive in 1944. Standing on the rain-slicked deck of HMS Vernon in Portsmouth Harbor, he stared at the skeletal remains of merchant ships jutting from the water like tombstones. German mines. Magnetic, acoustic, pressure-activated. The Kriegsmarine had turned British waters into a graveyard, and the Royal Navy was bleeding tonnage faster than Churchill could replace it. The wind carried the smell of diesel and seaweed as Crabbe watched another salvage crew haul twisted metal from the depths. Somewhere beneath those dark waters lay the answer to a question that kept Allied admirals awake at night. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see? The answer stood before him now, dripping salt water and defiance. It was a diving suit, but not the standard shallow water rig approved by the Admiralty. No copper helmet. No air hose tethering the diver to the surface like an umbilical cord. This was something else entirely. A closed-circuit oxygen rebreather, Italian in design, captured from a sunken XMAS flotilla operative off Gibraltar. Compact. Silent. Lethal in the right hands. Absolutely not, Commander Shelford had said 3 weeks earlier, his face red beneath his officer's cap. The Admiralty hasn't approved this equipment. One malfunction and you're breathing pure oxygen at depth. You'll seize up and drown before anyone knows you're in trouble. But Crabbe wasn't listening to Shelford anymore. He was listening to the ghosts. The previous month, HMS Queen Elizabeth had nearly gone to the bottom of Alexandria Harbor thanks to Italian frogmen riding manned torpedoes. They'd attached limpet mines to her hull and vanished like phantoms. No bubbles. No noise. Just devastation delivered from below. The Italians had weaponized invisibility, and now Hitler's U-boats were doing the same, laying mines in British harbors under cover of darkness, knowing the Royal Navy's clumsy hard-hat divers couldn't respond fast enough. Crabbe ran his hand along the rubberized fabric of the Italian suit. It was crude, patched, probably stolen from a dead man. But it worked. "You'll kill yourself," his fellow diver, Petty Officer Bailey, muttered, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Bailey had seen too many friends die in the dark water. "That thing wasn't designed for our conditions. One CO2 scrubber failure and you're breathing poison." Crabbe smiled, a thin, dangerous smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then I'd better not let it fail." The stakes were apocalyptic. Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, was less than 6 months away. Allied ships were massing in British ports, and German intelligence knew it. If the Kriegsmarine could mine those harbors, if they could sink enough transport vessels before D-Day, the entire invasion could collapse before it began. Thousands of American and British soldiers would drown before they ever saw French soil. Crabbe looked out at the harbor. Somewhere out there, beneath the oil-slicked surface, German saboteurs were already at work. He could feel it. The intelligence reports were vague, possible enemy diver activity, unexplained magnetic anomalies, but Crabbe had learned to trust his instincts. The Germans were here. In Portsmouth. In Scapa Flow. In every harbor that mattered. And they thought they were invisible. That night, Crabbe sat in the cramped equipment shed, studying the rebreather by lamplight. The device was ingenious in its simplicity. Pure oxygen stored in a small cylinder, exhaled breath scrubbed of carbon dioxide through a chemical filter, then recirculated. No bubbles. No sound. A diver could slip beneath an enemy ship, place explosives, and vanish without ever breaking the surface. But it was also a death trap. Oxygen toxicity. Caustic cocktail. Hypercapnia. The list of ways this thing could kill him was longer than the manual he didn't have. The Italians who'd used it had trained for years. Crabbe had 3 days. He strapped on the suit in the pre-dawn darkness, feeling the cold rubber grip his skin. The oxygen cylinder pressed against his spine. The mouthpiece tasted of rubber and salt. His hands shook as he adjusted the harness, not from fear, but from something worse. Anticipation. Bailey helped him into the water, whispering a prayer Crab couldn't hear through the blood pounding in his ears. The harbor swallowed him without a sound. No bubbles rose to mark his descent. He was a ghost now, slipping beneath the hull of HMS Valiant, searching for the telltale shapes of German limpet mines. The water was black. Not dark, black. His lamp cut a narrow beam through the murk, illuminating nothing but suspended sediment and the occasional startled fish. The silence was absolute. Every breath was a controlled exercise in survival. Inhale, hold, exhale into the scrubber, inhale again. His chest burned. His fingers went numb. And then he saw it. A shape. Wrong. Foreign. Attached to the hull like a metal barnacle. A mine. German. Magnetic. Armed. Crab's heartbeat spiked, sending bubbles. No, wait, no bubbles, through his system. He forced himself to breathe slowly. The mine was new. Recently placed. Which meant the diver who planted it might still be nearby. He swept his lamp in a slow arc. Nothing. Then, movement. A flash of something dark disappearing into the depths. Crab kicked after it, but the figure was already gone. Another ghost. Another operator in an unapproved suit, fighting a war the world above couldn't see. He surfaced 30 minutes later, gasping, alive, and holding a detailed sketch of the German mine's attachment mechanism. Commander Shelford stared at the drawing in stunned silence. "How many are down there?" he finally asked. "At least 12, Crab said, peeling off the Italian suit. "And that's just on Valiant." Shelford's face went pale. "Then we're already at war beneath the surface," he whispered. "And we're losing." Crab didn't disagree. But as he hung the unapproved suit back on its hook, he felt something shift inside him. The Royal Navy had rules. Regulations. Approved equipment lists that hadn't been updated since 1939. The Germans didn't care about rules. And neither would he. The real battle was about to begin. The Admiralty's emergency meeting convened at 0600 hours in a bunker beneath Whitehall. Crab stood in his still damp uniform, watching senior officers absorb the impossible truth. German combat swimmers were operating freely in British home waters, and the Royal Navy had no effective countermeasure. "We need authorization to form a specialized unit," Crab said, his voice cutting through the bureaucratic murmuring. "Divers trained in closed-circuit apparatus. Men who can hunt these bastards in the dark." Rear Admiral Bonham Carter leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Lieutenant Commander, the equipment you're proposing hasn't been tested. It hasn't been approved. The oxygen toxicity risk alone is less than the risk of losing half our fleet before D-Day," Crab interrupted. Silence. Finally, Bonham Carter nodded. "You have 2 weeks. Train your men. Clear our harbors. And for God's sake, don't let the press find out we're using captured enemy equipment." By nightfall, Crab had assembled his team. 12 divers, all volunteers, all aware they might not survive training. They gathered in a sealed warehouse at Portsmouth, where the Italian suits had been laid out like artifacts from an alien world. "These will keep you alive," Crab told them, holding up the rebreather, "or they'll kill you. There's no middle ground. The Germans have combat swimmers, Kampfschwimmers, trained by the Kriegsmarine Special Operations Division. They're professionals. We're starting from zero." Petty Officer Bailey spoke up. "How do we fight something we can't see?" "We become something they can't see," Crab replied. The training was brutal. They started in swimming pools, learning to control their breath while the oxygen mixture played tricks on their minds. Euphoria. Paranoia. The line between life and death was measured in partial pressure and chemical balance. 2 men washed out in the first week. One nearly drowned. The other suffered an oxygen-induced seizure that left him convulsing on the pool deck. But the rest adapted. They learned to navigate by compass in zero visibility. to plant dummy charges on ship hulls in under 3 minutes, to recognize the magnetic signature of German mines by feel alone. Every night, they descended into Portsmouth Harbor, invisible ghosts hunting invisible enemies. And then the intelligence breakthrough came. Naval intelligence intercepted a Kriegsmarine transmission, coded but sloppy. The Germans were planning a major operation, simultaneous sabotage attacks on Portsmouth, Plymouth, and Scapa Flow. The date, February 3, 1944. Just 4 nights away. They're sending a full combat team, the intelligence officer explained, spreading reconnaissance photos across the table. We've identified at least 6 swimmers based on supply requisitions from their base in Brest. They'll deploy from U-boats offshore and swim in under cover of darkness. Crabbe studied the photos. German combat swimmers were equipped with Draeger rebreathers, superior to the Italian design, with longer duration and better CO2 scrubbing. They carried limpet mines, underwater pistols, and knives designed for close-quarters combat. They were trained killers, and they were coming. We need to intercept them before they reach the ships, Crabbe said. How? Bonham Carter demanded. You can't patrol the entire harbor approach. We don't patrol, Crabbe said, his eyes hard. We set a trap. The plan was insane. Instead of defending the ships, they would bait the Germans in, leaving HMS Warspite deliberately vulnerable, its hull unguarded, its location leaked through channels known to be compromised by German intelligence. When the Kampfschwimmers approached, Crabbe's team would be waiting in the darkness below. It's suicide, Bailey said. It's the only way, Crabbe replied. February 3rd arrived with a bitter wind and choppy seas. Crabbe and his team slipped into the water at 2,100 hours, 2 hours before the expected German arrival. They positioned themselves beneath Warspite's hull, suspended in the black water, breathing silently through their Italian suits. The wait was agony. Every creak of the ship's hull sounded like an approaching enemy. Crabbe's oxygen supply ticked down with mechanical precision. 40 minutes. 30. 20. Then, contact. A shadow. Movement in the peripheral darkness. Crabbe's hand found his knife, his heartbeat thundering in his chest but releasing no bubbles to betray his position. The shadow resolved into a figure, a German diver, sleek and efficient in his Draeger rig, carrying a cylindrical limpet mine toward Warspite's hull. Crabbe waited. 1 more second. 1 more meter. Then he struck. The underwater combat was nightmarish. No sound. No screams. Just 2 men grappling in absolute darkness, knives flashing in the narrow beam of dropped lamps. Crabbe felt the German's blade slice across his shoulder, felt his own knife find resistance and then sink deep. The water around them darkened with blood, invisible in the black depths, but Crabbe could taste it, metallic and bitter. The German went limp. Around him, Crabbe heard, felt, other struggles. His team had engaged the rest of the Kampfschwimmer unit. A limpet mine tumbled past him, disarmed, sinking into the silt. Another German diver kicked desperately toward the surface, only to be dragged back down by 2 British swimmers. But 1 German was missing. Crabbe spun in the water, his lamp sweeping the darkness. There, near Warspite's stern, a final shadow placing the last mine. The diver worked with professional calm, magnetic clamps securing the explosive against the hull. In 30 seconds, he'd be done. In 30 minutes, Warspite would be at the bottom of Portsmouth Harbor. Crabbe kicked hard, his oxygen running low, his muscles screaming. He covered the distance in 8 seconds. Too slow. The German saw him coming and drew his underwater pistol, a specialized Kampf pistol designed to fire steel darts in water. The first dart missed Crabbe's head by inches. The second buried itself in his buoyancy compensator, sending him tumbling. The German turned back to his mine, activating the timer. 15 minutes. Crabbe had 15 minutes to disarm a device he'd never seen before, while drowning in his own damaged equipment. He grabbed the German's ankle and pulled hard. They collided against the hull, both men out of position, both weapons lost in the darkness. The German's eyes were visible behind his mask, pale, determined, professional. They both knew only one of them would surface. The fight lasted 12 seconds. When it was over, Crab hung suspended in the water, the German's body sinking slowly toward the harbor floor. His hands found the limpet mine. 11 minutes on the timer. His oxygen was gone. He was breathing on fumes now, each inhale a gamble. Focus. Magnetic clamps. Release mechanism. Wires. Red or blue? Neither. Yellow. The mine came free with a magnetic thunk that echoed through the water. Crab clutched it to his chest and kicked for the surface, his vision narrowing, his lungs burning. He broke through into cold air and gasping chaos. Mine! Mine! He choked out, and hands grabbed him, pulled him onto a support boat, yanked the device from his grip. The bomb squad had 4 minutes to disarm it. They did it in 3. Crab lay on the deck, coughing seawater, bleeding from a dozen cuts he couldn't remember receiving. Around him, his team surfaced one by one. Bailey, Morrison, Davies, all alive, all victorious. 6 German combat swimmers had entered Portsmouth Harbor that night. None of them left. But the real test was still ahead. 3 weeks later, the nightmare escalated. Naval intelligence delivered a report that made Crab's blood run cold. Corvettenkapitän Klaus Schmidt, the Kriegsmarine's top combat swimmer instructor, had been deployed to Norway. His target, Scapa Flow, the Royal Navy's primary anchorage in the Orkney Islands. Home to 47 capital ships, including battleships that would spearhead the Normandy invasion. "Schmidt is the best they have," the intelligence officer said, sliding a grainy photograph across the table. It showed a lean man with cold eyes and a knight's cross at his throat. "Trained the unit you fought in Portsmouth. He's never failed a mission." "Then he's overdue," Crab said. But even he didn't believe it. Scapa Flow was different. Deeper. Colder. More heavily defended. The Royal Navy had learned from Pearl Harbor, anti-submarine nets, patrol boats, sonar buoys. But Schmidt wasn't coming in a submarine. He was coming the way Crab would come, beneath the surface, invisible, impossible to stop. The team deployed to Scapa Flow on March 1, 1944. The Orkney Islands greeted them with horizontal rain and seas that made even hardened sailors vomit. Crab stood on the deck of their patrol boat, staring at the massive fleet anchored in the flow. Each ship represented thousands of lives. Each ship was a potential target. "We can't defend them all," Bailey said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "We don't defend," Crab replied. "We hunt." But hunting Schmidt was like hunting a ghost's ghost. For 2 weeks, they patrolled the underwater approaches to Scapa Flow, finding nothing. No mines. No tracks. No sign of enemy activity. The waiting gnawed at them. Some men began to whisper that Schmidt had been delayed or reassigned or killed in a submarine attack. Crab knew better. Schmidt was here. Watching. Waiting for them to make a mistake. On March 14th, the mistake happened. A routine patrol missed a sonar contact, dismissed as a whale or debris. But Crab's instincts screamed otherwise. He grabbed his Italian suit and hit the water within minutes, diving deep into the flow's icy currents. The visibility was worse than Portsmouth, 3 feet at best, 0 at worst. He descended to 80 feet, then 90, pushing the suit beyond its tested limits. His lamp cut a narrow tunnel through the murk. Nothing. Nothing. There. A shape that didn't belong. Streamlined. Man-made. A German Draeger unit attached to something larger. Crab approached cautiously, his knife drawn. The object resolved into a weapon he'd only seen in intelligence briefings, a Neger human torpedo. One-man submersible, armed with an underslung warhead. Schmidt wasn't planting mines. He was going to ram a ship directly, martyr-style, guaranteeing the kill. The Neger was empty, which meant Schmidt was already inside Scapa Flow. Crabbe kicked toward the surface, his mind racing. Schmidt would target the largest ship, the one whose loss would hurt most. That meant HMS Duke of York, the fleet flagship. She was anchored in the flow's center, surrounded by escorts, supposedly untouchable. Unless you were beneath her. Crabbe surfaced near his patrol boat, shouting orders. "Get me to Duke of York, now." They made the crossing in 12 minutes, 8 minutes too slow. As they approached, Crabbe saw it, a faint disturbance in the water near the battleship's stern. Not waves. Not current. Something moving deliberately beneath the surface. He didn't wait for the boat to stop. He rolled backward into the water, his Italian suit already sealed, his knife in hand. The cold hit him like a fist. Scapa Flow was barely above freezing, but he kicked hard, descending beneath Duke of York's massive hull. And there was Schmidt. The German was positioned beneath the ship's magazine, placing a charge 3 times larger than anything they'd encountered. His movements were precise, economical, professional. He sensed Crabbe's approach and turned, his hand moving to the underwater pistol at his belt. But Crabbe was already moving. They collided in the darkness. 2 apex predators, 2 invisible warriors, fighting for the survival of ships they'd never board. Schmidt was faster, stronger, better trained. His knife opened a gash across Crabbe's ribs. His pistol fired a dart that missed Crabbe's jugular by millimeters. But Crabbe was angrier. He thought of the ships lost, the sailors drowned, the war that hung in the balance. He grabbed Schmidt's wrist and twisted, feeling bones grind. The German's knife tumbled away. They grappled against Duke of York's hull, 2 ghosts locked in a death embrace no one above could see or hear. Schmidt's oxygen line came free in Crabbe's hand. The German's eyes went wide behind his mask. He clawed at Crabbe, desperation replacing training, but Crabbe held him down, held him in the black water, held him until the struggling stopped. Schmidt's body sank slowly, the charge still in his dead hands. Crabbe grabbed it, checked the timer. 43 seconds. He couldn't disarm it. The mechanism was too complex, too unfamiliar. So he did the only thing he could. He kicked away from Duke of York, swimming as hard as his exhausted body allowed, dragging the explosive with him, praying he'd get far enough. 30 seconds. 20. His vision tunneled. His oxygen was gone. He was breathing nothing now, lungs screaming, brain shutting down. 10 seconds. He let go of the charge and kicked for the surface, knowing he wouldn't make it. 5, 4, 3. The explosion caught him from below, a hammer blow of pressure that shattered his eardrums and sent him tumbling. The shock wave slammed him into unconsciousness, and he sank like a stone into the freezing darkness. Somewhere above, alarms rang. Men shouted. Patrol boats converged on the expanding debris field. And in the black water, Lionel Crabbe drifted downward, the unapproved Italian suit still clutched around his dying body. But death would have to wait a little longer. Crabbe woke to pain. Absolute, comprehensive, world-ending pain. His ribs were broken. His ears bled. His lungs felt like they'd been filled with broken glass. But he was alive, floating on the surface of Scapa Flow, held up by the buoyancy of the Italian suit that refused to let him drown. Hands grabbed him, pulled him from the water. Bailey's face swam into focus, pale and terrified. "You mad bastard," Bailey was saying, over and over. "You mad, beautiful bastard." The charge had detonated 300 yards from Duke of York, far enough to spare the battleship, close enough to send a column of water 50 feet into the air. Schmidt's body was never recovered. His Neger torpedo was found the next day, scuttled in the shallows, its mission failed. Crabbe spent 2 weeks in a hospital bed at Scapa Flow, his body slowly reassembling itself. Officers came and went, bringing commendations he didn't want and questions he couldn't answer. How had he known Schmidt's plan? How had he survived the explosion? Why hadn't he waited for backup? He didn't tell them the truth, that hunting Schmidt hadn't been about tactics or training. It had been about becoming the thing he hunted, a ghost, invisible, willing to die in water so dark no one would ever find the body. On April 1, 1944, Crabb returned to duty. His Italian suit, the unapproved, captured jury-rigged piece of equipment that had saved his life, hung in his locker, patched and repaired. The Admiralty still hadn't officially sanctioned it. They probably never would. He didn't care. By June, his team had cleared 47 German mines from British harbors. They'd intercepted 8 more Kampfschwimmer units. They'd become the thing that goes bump in the night beneath the hulls of enemy ships, the silent response to Germany's invisible war. On June 6, 1944, the Allied fleet sailed for Normandy. Not a single transport ship was lost to sabotage. The harbors were clear. The approach routes were safe. And when American soldiers waded onto Omaha Beach, they did so from ships that Lionel Crabb had kept afloat. No one would ever know his name. The newspapers called D-Day a miracle of planning and logistics. They praised Eisenhower and Montgomery. They spoke of brave infantrymen and daring paratroopers. They never mentioned the men who fought in absolute darkness, breathing air that could kill them, armed with equipment their own navy hadn't approved. Crabb didn't mind. After the war, he continued diving, investigating sunken ships, recovering bodies, training new generations of combat swimmers. The Italian suit was eventually replaced by better designs, officially sanctioned, thoroughly tested. But Crabb kept the original, hanging in his shed like a relic from another life. He died in 1956 during a classified operation in Portsmouth Harbor, the same harbor where he'd fought his first underwater battle. The official story was murky, contradictory, possibly a lie. Some said the Soviets had killed him. Others claimed it was a training accident. His body was never definitively identified. Perhaps it was fitting. The man who'd spent years being invisible had become invisible himself. But before he vanished, Crabb had changed the nature of naval warfare forever. The equipment he'd proven, the tactics he'd developed, the courage he'd demonstrated, became the foundation for every special operations dive team that followed. The U.S. Navy SEALs, the British SBS, the combat swimmers of a dozen nations. All of them owed a debt to the man who trusted an unapproved suit more than he trusted regulations. Epilogue. In a sealed archive in Whitehall, there's a file marked Crabb, L.K., Classified. Inside are after-action reports from Portsmouth, Scapa Flow, and a dozen other harbors whose names remain redacted. There are photographs of captured German equipment, technical drawings of improvised rebreathers, and casualty lists of enemy combat swimmers who disappeared beneath British ships. And there's one other item, a worn, patched, Italian-designed closed-circuit diving suit, serial number scratched off, bloodstains still visible on the shoulder. The suit that shouldn't have worked. The suit that saved a fleet. The suit that outsmarted Hitler's navy by refusing to follow the rules. Next to it, pinned to the fabric, is a handwritten note in Crabb's blocky script. Approved or not, it kept me alive long enough to matter. That's all the authorization I needed. LKC, 1944-inch. The file remains sealed. The story remains secret. And somewhere in the cold waters off Portsmouth, ghosts still swim in the darkness, breathing silence, carrying the weight of wars no one remembers. But the ships stayed afloat. And that's the only legacy that matters.